this is Chelsea with Ready Jet Go Travels. Thank you all for joining me tonight. I don't have a whole lot that I want to cover tonight, but I did want to talk about the new COVID testing requirements that were issued last week, and they go into effect next week. So they put it out last week. Next week on the 26th, they kind of go into effect. I just wanted to cover those with you all so you know what they are if you happen to be traveling outside of the US. And then, honestly, if we're being really honest, I really just wanted to come chill in my office with the door closed while my husband watches the kids because it's kind of like quiet time. I mean, I can still hear them screaming somewhat, but they're not in my lap, so that's nice. So I actually tonight poured myself a glass of wine and thought I would come and answer some questions if you all have them after we cover the new testing requirements for COVID. So I want to cover those first. If you don't know what I'm talking about, last week on the 12th, the CDC issued new testing requirements. It used to be before, if you were traveling outside of the states, the destination that you were going to might have some kind of requirements for COVID testing. Like once you arrived or, prior to your departure, you might have to take a test. That still stands based on the destination that you're going to. So for instance, most places in the Caribbean right now, if you're traveling there, they're going to want a negative test before you leave. And you have to have proof of that whenever you get there. And that used to be all it was. You would get your test before you left, go to your vacation, and then come back, and everything was fine. However, the CDC has issued this new rule. So now, not only are you required to test before you leave, if the destination requires that, but before you're allowed to get on the plane to come back home, the U.S. is mandating that you have a test completed. So we've already kind of had to walk through some of the layout of this with some clients that are traveling, but I wanted to let anybody know who's considering traveling or who might have booked themselves, or if you already have something on the books that you've done yourself or booked through another travel agent. I want to make sure that you're aware of this as well, so that way you're not caught by surprise. So basically what the CDC is saying is within 72 hours of you coming back home, you have to get a COVID test done. You have to have the results of that test in your hands, printed out in your hands, whenever you go to board your flight back home. If you don't have that, you won't be flying back home. Sometimes, wording is it's recommended or suggested, but the wording for this, I'll read this for you word for word. Let me find it. If a passenger does not provide documentation of a negative test or recovery or chooses not to take a test, the airline must deny boarding to the passenger. So if you're not taking that test, then you're not flying back home, which, I guess if you just want to lay on the beach for a long time, it's perfectly fine. But if you have to get back and you have to go to work, then you need to know that you're going to be required to take that test before you can get back on the plane. And that is, it's required whenever you check in. So when you go to check in at the airport, if you don't have that test with you, that airline is not going to let you on. The good news is that most resorts are already putting plans in place so that they offer testing on resort. This isn't the case with all of the resorts, but there are quite a few of them that are offering tests on resort. So I know I worked with a client last week just to kind of, look at everything, make sure everything was going to work out. And the resort that they were staying at offers the test on resort, but it is an additional charge. So that is something else that you need to think about too. It wasn't expensive. I think it was like $33 a person, which isn't bad, but it's something that you do want to plan on just in case, you don't want it to spring up on you, be surprised. So the big thing is that you need to know that if you are traveling outside of the U.S., if you're flying outside of the U.S., when you go to fly back, you're going to have those test results. And it can't be more than 72 hours before your flight. Let me make sure that it's exactly 72 hours. Let's see. And now I can't find it, but I'm 72 hours before. So, really, maybe 3 days before you come home, you want to make sure that you're getting that test done. You want to do it really as early as possible within the time frame, so that way you're not waiting on test results in case something gets slowed down or anything like that. Because I don't know about you all, but if you've heard of Murphy's Law, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. That's pretty much what happens when I travel. There's always some kind of random kink. We got stuck in Ecuador for 2 weeks, kind of just, seat of our pants traveling because they shut down all of their transportation. So, things like that. So I like to try to plan ahead, and in trying to plan ahead, just know that you'll want to take that test as soon as you can in that time frame, so that way you give yourself some time in case there's any issues getting those test results back. But that is really the big thing that I wanted to talk about. I don't know if anybody has any questions about traveling, any questions about the test itself. The test itself is not terrible. It's a nasal swab, quick, pretty. It's not painful, painless, uncomfortable, yeah. But it's not bad. So if you've not had it before and you're worried about it, it's not a bad test at all. And it's quick. It's over before it starts, really. So, but if anybody has any questions about travel itself, about COVID tests, anything like that, feel free to drop it in the comments. I'm going to give myself a sip of wine and waste some time while my husband watches the kids. So I'm hoping that somebody has some questions, because I like the quiet in my office. I don't know if you all know, but we are still not sailing, so that's an important thing to know if you are looking at traveling of some sort. We're still not sailing yet. Most of those are pushed out into May at this point. Honestly, I'm not sure when they're going to release them. The CDC is working with the cruise lines to develop basically a safety sailing when it comes to COVID, because they are kind of concerned about the cruise ships where you're kind of just more, close quarters and you can't really spread out as much. The cruise lines are working really hard to get all of that done, but they want to make sure that they are being very safe and things are good to go whenever they come back. So we are not sailing yet, but you can do air travel to a destination. I do want to point out that if you are doing air travel to a destination, that you'll want to make sure that your passports are good and in order. Right now, the passports are about 10 to 12 weeks out. So it's about twice what it normally takes to process them. They're still kind of recovering from that COVID shutdown. So if you don't have your passports, you really want to make sure that you're getting those and you're giving yourself ample time for them to get returned, because it is taking about twice the normal time. Even expedited is about twice the normal time of what it takes. So don't kind of lean on the fact that you'll choose expedited or whatever. So passports, that's a big deal. Just make sure that you're getting those done. Otherwise, I don't really have anything else. Kind of hoping that somebody has a question though, because I don't want to end this live just yet, because my kids are actually being really quiet right now. My husband turned on Cars for them. So my baby, my two babies, I guess, are watching Cars right now. So they're being quiet and they're being good. And I'm kind of chilling out here drinking some wine and answering some travel questions. So if you have anything, please let me know. If you're just coming in, I was talking about the CDC's new requirements for testing. So if you're traveling outside of the U.S. now, it used to be that if your destination required a COVID test, you would have to do it. So for instance, Mexico didn't require COVID testing. So you could travel to Mexico, there and back, without having to take a COVID test. But that's changed now. And the U.S. is actually mandating that you take a test before you fly back home. So you have to have that negative test in hand in order to hop on the airplane to come back home. So if it's not something that you've planned for, you want to plan for it now. It is an additional charge. I've not seen any resorts yet that are including it in their pricing. They might at some point, but that's not the case now. However, some resorts are starting to offer it on site, so you don't have to leave the resort to go get the test done, which is nice. I did talk about how we're still not cruising. Cruises still aren't going, which is kind of a bummer for a lot of my clients. I know I have some really loyal cruisers. So if you're transitioning from cruising to land travel because you need to get out and get a vacation, you'll need to remember that you do have to have a passport for air travel outside the country. That's not always the case for cruising. So I know some of my cruisers do it just because, they don't have to have that passport. But you do have to have the passport for any kind of air travel outside of the US. And right now, it's about 10 to 12 weeks to get that passport. So if you're wanting to travel and you're looking for the summer, you want to start getting the passport stuff done now to give yourself some time in case there are any errors. And even expedited is taking about twice as long as it usually does. So you want to make sure that you give yourself ample time and don't let it sneak up on you, because it can sneak up on you easily. Otherwise, I don't have anything, but if anybody has any questions, then I would love to answer them. If you're just tuning in, I am just kind of hanging out here in my peaceful, quiet office. We have 8 kids, so things can get really loud and really rowdy, and although it is a whole lot of fun, it's a whole lot of chaos sometimes. So sometimes it's kind of nice just to chill out in my office and talk to people that I can't see. Which I guess, a lot could be said about that. But I am sipping on wine and answering any travel questions. I'm just kind of hanging out to see if anybody has anything, while I wait, and just see what's going on with everybody. As far as air travel goes, here is Randall. Hi, Randall. I'm going to bring you up on the screen. Randall wants to know how has travel to Hawaii. So Hawaii has kind of been its own special thing anyway. They have always had some kind of quarantine requirement or testing requirement in place already. Just because they are an island and they're kind of, off to themselves and secluded. This whole time, if you wanted to travel to Hawaii, you were either going to have to quarantine for 14 days when you got there, or you were going to have a negative test before you arrived. So Hawaii is really no different than, traveling to another country. The plus side is that, you're still in the States. So I'm assuming that whenever you come home from Hawaii, you're not going to have to retest. I'm making that assumption. I would lean on that about 99%, but I will have to find out for sure just to verify. But Hawaii has kind of always been its own special thing, just because of they're out there on their own in the ocean. They've always had some very strict requirements as far as COVID travel, just to keep their island a little more protected. So if you're wanting to go to Hawaii, it's not going to change anything as far as this COVID requirement for the U.S. isn't going to change any of that. But I know that travel in general is picking back up, but it's not to where it was. And Hawaii is one of those destinations that I've always recommended that you book a year in advance if you can, at least 6 months in advance though, because Hawaii does tend to book up very quickly. However, with not as many people traveling, that means that if you're looking at Hawaii, the chances of you being able to find something is going to be better. So, you're going to probably be able to find something, if you were looking to travel in the next 3 months or 4 months, the chances of you being able to find something are going to be better than if you were doing that on any typical year. 2020 and 2021 have not been typical at all. So let's say if you were in 2019, and you wanted to go to Hawaii, it would be more difficult to do it more last minute. But there are going to be a few more options likely if you were wanting to do that now. So I am just chilling. I'm going to sip my wine for a little second and see if anybody has anything else, or if you have any other questions, Randall, about Hawaii or anything that I didn't cover that you want to know, just let me know. If you are just coming on, I've been talking about the CDC requirements for traveling now. So if you're traveling home from an international destination, you are now going to have to take the COVID test. basically, in a nutshell. Don't try to come home without it because the airlines aren't going to let you on, and you need to have it done within 72 hours of your return flight. So don't take it too soon because it's not going to do you any good. But otherwise, if nobody has any questions, I guess I'm going to call it a night and go sit with my family and watch Cars because that's what they're doing right now. They're chilling and watching Cars. So if anybody has any questions, if you're watching this in a replay or if you're just hopping on and you don't get your question in before I hop off, feel free to leave any questions anyway. I always circle back around and answer anything. But in a nutshell, if you're traveling internationally now, be prepared to have a COVID test when you come home. It's likely going to be an extra charge outside of the charges of your trip. You'll have to pay it in destination, although a lot of resorts are working to get testing on site available so you don't have to leave the resort to have your testing done, which is nice. But that is pretty much all I have for tonight. Thank you all for joining me. I hope that if you were traveling and you weren't aware of this new requirement, that you're aware now. And if you're looking to travel, just know that destination countries and the US, all of these different resorts, they're all working together to try to keep everything as safe as possible. So that way you can still have some normalcy to your life. You can still go out and have that vacation and enjoy yourself and be safe while you're doing it. And you don't have quite as many concerns about, contracting COVID or anything like that. But I am going to go. I'm going to go take my little glass of wine and sit on the couch and watch Cars with my kids. If you all have any questions, again, feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll circle back around and get them. But thank you all so much for joining me, and I will see you all next week. Bye.